All right, welcome back, everyone. So it's Marathon Monday, Boston Marathon going on right now. We just watched some epic finishes, and I'm currently glued to the tracker watching a bunch of my athletes. And with it being race season, thought it was one of those perfect times. Been getting tons of questions across all different aspects of running as we are in the main part of the season. So I figured, why do it solo? I figured I'd bring in one of my favorite running experts, one of my fellow LP endurance coaches. Ryan Power to tackle a bunch of the questions with me today. Welcome, Ryan. What's going on?
Thanks so much for having me today, Mark. Being called an expert, I don't know. Hopefully, I can live up to that. But no, I'm happy to join, happy to chat running. And we've both been filled up with motivation watching Boston this morning. So, yeah, it'll be fun chatting. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Yes, it's dangerous to watch this on a Monday when we both got races next weekend. So we're going to be way too hyped going into our midweek workout, taper workouts.
I feel like I need the hype. It's been such a rough winter that finally the last couple weekends we've gotten some decent weather for our long runs. And so I'll take any extra hype I can get because it's been pretty low for a while.
Amen to that. Maybe before we dive into it, just in case people aren't familiar with you, maybe you could give us a quick rundown of like your sporting and coaching past over the last 100 years that you've been coaching.
I know, I was just thinking I rarely feel like I'm getting old, but when I start thinking or talking about my history in sport, I'm like, yeah, I've got a lot to cover. I guess I've been doing this for a while. But yeah, I mean my like background in sport, I mean I've always been involved in some kind of sport, like from as long as I can remember. But growing up, baseball was my big one. So I played competitive baseball until grade 10 or grade 11 or something. And played football a little bit as well in high school. But really kind of getting into the endurance side of things started with track in high school. So I started running track and then ran for a track and field club as well through the kind of the second half of high school. Um, so really I've been running for, geez, about 20 years now in some capacity over some distance. And I think I've covered a pretty wide range of distances over that time. But I mean, when I was running track, I think it's important to point out, like I was by no means like a prodigy runner or like a star track athlete. I actually had one of the coaches on my club tell me one time, Ryan, we love having you on the club, but I want to make it clear that you haven't made teams because of your talent or because of your times. You're here because of your work ethic and because people see you working hard. Which was like, I think a good reality check at the time. I mean, I think the hard thing with track, I'm kind of going on a tangent already, but the hard thing with track is everything is so black and white in terms of like you've either made time standards to make a team or to make youth sports or whatever your kind of avenue of track is, or you haven't. And I was really good at like just running myself into the ground, trying to make these times and never quite being there. And so the year before or the summer before I was starting first year university, I'd been planning on running varsity at Western. And I guess that work ethic got me in trouble because I ended up with stress fractures in both my tibia in the summer between grade 12 and first year university. And at that point, I was like, I'm so done with this. Like this isn't fun. Like this sport kind of sucks for me. Um, and I kind of always had the idea of triathlon in the back of my mind. Actually, growing up in our little neighborhood, one of our neighbors was an Ironman triathlete back when I was, 7, 8 years old, thinking like I really had no idea what it was, but thinking that's the coolest thing I could ever imagine. And I remember this guy, John, our neighbor, would like roll past our house sometimes on his like old school yellow soft ride bike. Do you remember those? Like the beam
Oh
bike?
yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And so in that kind of summer where I was like mulling over my life choices as essentially like a failed track athlete, I ended up buying a road bike, I think on eBay or something, like really having no idea what I was looking for. But I was like, I need to change, I need something different. And I remember getting this bike and building it up and getting out and riding just in the country roads. And I still vividly, this is like 20 years ago now almost, I still vividly remember thinking out on one of my first road bike rides ever, like, I must be doing this wrong. There's no way that a sport can actually be this fun. and not just like this miserable grind, just beating the hell out of yourself all the time for like mediocre results that aren't even good enough to get you on a team or get you in a club type of thing. So I was pretty sold at that point that like this is going to be the thing that I'm going to do. And I didn't really care where it took me. It was, I think, probably the first time that I chose a sport and I chose a direction rather than being influenced by, in a positive way, but by parents or friends and things like that, and really starting to find my direction with sport. Um, so that's a long-winded way of saying I've been doing triathlon for close to 20 years now. And I've also kind of interspersed running races, both on the road and on the trail throughout that time as well. So, yeah, I've been involved in some form of running, whether it be sprinting on the track or like ultras, for almost 20 years now, and triathlon for most of that time as well. So, yeah, I guess I have been around for a while.
I think that's why I appreciate to you about this stuff is you've come through like a bunch of different like almost eras of triathlon and running and seen like the development of all the crazy stuff we have going on today, whether it's like super shoes or technology. And like I like how open-minded you are and like you don't say no to the past stuff or the new stuff and you like find this cool blend sort of between them based on your experience and stuff like that.
I try really hard not to be like the crusty old man in the sport that's like, I was so much better in the 90s when we had to stop at McDonald's during our Ironmans and get weighed every 5K to make sure we weren't dying. But I mean, and actually, the funny thing is, for a lot of the time, and probably when we first kind of connected, um, in like late 2010s, like 2017, 2018, I had kind of found my niche in triathlon, in terms of like coaching or advising, more so on like the bike performance side of things, because I was always super interested in like technical developments and latest research going on there. And for a while was like advising some of the top pros in Canada on equipment choice, on bike fitting, things like that. And that was like really my thing. And now it seems, 6, 7 years later, all of a sudden running is kind of like taking the forefront of, either my interest or my expertise, whatever that may be. But yeah, I think it's always just from a lens of like always trying to gain knowledge and trying to share it too. My philosophy with a coach as a coach is I never want to be someone who's just like collecting this knowledge and then becoming this gatekeeper of information and expertise. Like what I love doing as a coach or just in the sport in general is, geeking out on all the latest research and equipment and trends and things like that. And doing my best to kind of sift through and sort out what I feel is, really valuable or what I see as like potential, for, improvement in the sport and just doing my best to share it as broadly as possible. And I think if we all do that as coaches, then we're all better off in the sport. And so, yeah, I guess I've found my way over many years of, kind of going through various eras or like niches of, both sport and kind of my focus in racing, but also on the coaching side as well.
There been some like influences, like big ones in your past, especially on the running side, like from certain experts, whether it's like Panova, Lydiard, Jack Daniels, or like your past coaches or just your own experience or coaching that have really like kind of crafted where you're at today?
For sure. I mean, I've had the opportunity to work with some really amazing coaches, myself over the years. So one of my first like really, I guess, formative experiences in triathlon was back in 2009. There was, a provincial training center set up in Guelph, which was kind of an affiliate of the National Training Center that was in Victoria, and they had hired a really strong, professional triathlon coach by the name of Craig Taylor, who then went on to coach several Olympians and have a really incredible roster and resume of coaching and of athletes. And he was the first real coach that I had that, I was just like floored with the amount of knowledge and passion he had, and just his mannerisms for in-person coaching. Like that was a really interesting and like super valuable experience I had being able to train with that team for a few months, and then staying friends with a lot of the athletes on there. And I've worked with some other great coaches over the years as well. I was coached by James Loring at a Guelph for many years, like 10-ish years. And then I would say in the last 6 or 7 years is when I've started, kind of taking my own coaching a little bit more, putting more time and emphasis into it, I guess. I mean, I technically got my NCCP coaching certification back in 2008. And of all things, that came about because in 2008 I was diagnosed with a spinal condition called spondylolisthesis, which is just a very technical word for like an instability in my spine. And I was told at that time, like, you're done with sport. Like the sports physician said, find something else to do because you are not going to be an athlete. That's not your thing. And so I said, well, I love the sport that I had like just recently found, and so I wanted to continue that. So I decided to start coaching. So I got my coaching certification in 2008, but really um, started putting more time and emphasis into personal coaching probably 8 or 9 years after that. And as I've kind of grown as a coach and kind of taken on coaching myself, running my own training programs, using myself as a guinea pig, that's that's really where I've gotten more into like really having a keen interest in diving into the latest research, trends that are going on with professional level coaches and athletes around the world. And so I also, in part of my, I guess, day job is working with researchers at the university here. And so I've always had a really keen interest in like biomechanics research, exercise physiology, and things that are coming out of the labs there, and how that can kind of apply to what we do outside in triathlon or in endurance sport. But also, I mean, I'm the first to admit, and you know well as along with me, like I've been a David Roach disciple for many years now. I mean, his theories and philosophies just made complete sense to me, even coming from the context of ultra running. I when I started reading his like his articles that he was writing for Trail Runner magazine, like in 2017, 2018 was when I first got introduced to him. Immediately I realized like all of these alignments between ultra running and triathlon running. And so I became super interested in that and started applying some of his theories of training to myself, mostly because a lot of it was so different from what I had been doing before, but it just made so much logical sense that I was like, I need to try this for myself just to see if it's real. Like, if including like strides in my running can actually make me a faster runner. And realized pretty quickly that he was really onto something. And I mean, David has a really extensive background in exercise science, and his wife Megan is a doctor. So I knew that it was coming from a really solid foundational exercise physiology base. And so yeah, I've really aligned myself with a lot of been going on in his world for a while, and it's been really cool to see over the last year or so that he's really become a little bit more mainstream. Like this super niche, like all trail ultra running coach has really kind of hit the mainstream, and it's really like, in my opinion, preaching the good word of just sharing knowledge and things that truly work and why they work. And so in terms of coaching influences, those have definitely been some big ones for me.
Yeah, I think he just had Jess McLean, who he coaches, was just fastest American at Boston today. It's cool how he has that like, yeah, blend between a lot of ultra and sort of road runners, and they're crushing it on both sides and they're jumping back and forth between the two. So a lot of parallels, it seems.
Yeah, and it's really amazing. Like as you said, the breadth of athletes that he and his squad have, and it just further solidifies the training theories that they follow. That they can have athletes racing Olympic trials for 5,000 on the track, and going out and running 200 milers. And the philosophy behind the training is largely the same. And so that's what I found really fascinating with the approach that they take. And yeah, I think they're really onto something, and it's inspiring to see someone who's so willing to just share that knowledge and be so out there with that messaging.
Sweet. All right, let's dive into some of these questions. So we'll keep it to I'm sure we could go on many tangents in terms of like triathlon versus ultra versus running, but maybe we'll keep it a little bit more to running with mostly road running focus with maybe we can touch on. I have a few questions. We might not get to them on this episode because we'll keep it to an hour today, but mostly road running, and then we can touch maybe on some trail stuff a little bit more on some of the other episodes. But there's definitely a big debate these days on in terms of like the high mileage versus like lower mileage and quality versus a combo. Where is your kind of and this may be athlete dependent, I'm sure, is what a lot of the answers are going to say. Definitely is my answer as a coach a lot of times. But where's your philosophy sort of at these days in terms of the mileage quality debate and how those blend together?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and as you said, probably the shortest answer I can provide is that it depends. It depends on the athlete. But I try to kind of break that down. Like I'll never have when I start coaching an athlete, I'll never have specific targets of, I want this athlete to hit X number of miles per week or X number of minutes at intensity per week type of thing. It's always a little bit of a moving target, and it's definitely based on the individual athlete's kind of capacity for training, whether that's their physical capacity or their time commitments or their ability to handle stress outside of like work and family and all this other stuff. So the way I kind of break it down is I try to kind of start with like for lack of a better term, like a hierarchy of needs. So the first thing that I'll try to build with an athlete is just their consistency, like week over week of um, just day in, day out getting the running in and kind of minimizing any of those inevitable dips in training that do happen, but we try to minimize like the unnecessary missed workouts or anything like that. And then once we've kind of established just like a baseline of consistency, then I really try to dial in on like their frequency within the week. So like how often they're running per week. And what that really does is just set the stage for like building solid habits and a solid schedule that they can do repeatedly. And so it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it where we really want most of the training to be just consistent, routine, kind of habit based, because that's where you're really going to see like the long-term growth with building the consistency. And so once we kind of established like getting someone running regularly, figuring out the frequency per week that works for them, then I try to dial in like what's the right dose of intensity for that athlete. And that's where it starts getting, I think, really individual. And I mean, even though it's individual, I think you can still find that it's pretty predictable. Like if you're talking, say, number of minutes at or above threshold per week, like it's usually a pretty narrow window that most athletes will fall in. Um, but what I really try to do with the intensity part is kind of find like the minimum effective dose of intensity, because doing too much of it can really wear you down without giving a whole lot more benefit. And then once we have all of those pieces of the puzzle together, then I'll kind of dial in like what's your weekly mileage or how maybe more importantly, how much mileage per week can you consistently maintain over, say, like a 6 week training block? Because I don't really care if someone can run 190 or 100K week. I want to look at like what have you done the last 6 months? Because that's what's really going to give us the idea of like what is your capacity, what can you consistently hit, and as you know as a coach, like seeing that consistency over a 6 month or 1 year or better yet, like 10 year stretch is really gonna show where like the breakthroughs for running will happen. And so I guess my short answer or conclusion to that question is mileage and intensity are definitely both important and they both kind of play into each other. Um, but I do believe that having a little bit of intensity and having some emphasis on speed is a really critical aspect of any run training program, regardless of distance you're doing. And so I try to build that in first and then figure out kind of what's the appropriate amount of mileage someone can hit while being consistent with it, but also showing like progression in their training while they're doing it. Because again, if someone is progressing and you can see it in workout data, if they're improving, if they're getting faster in the hard workouts or at a set heart rate for an easy run, and they're running say 50 or 60K a week, they may not get faster by bumping them up to 80K a week. Like their speed and their like the physiological metrics may stay kind of the same. And so at that point, like you're not really gaining anything by running longer. So why are you doing it? Like you're just asking yourself for plateauing, for injury risk, things like that. And so it's definitely a an individual thing. It's definitely a moving target even within the individual. But those are kind of some of the variables I'm looking at when I'm trying to put all those pieces together.
Cool. And maybe we could use an example, like say we have an age group athlete who's training for like something like a half marathon coming up, and maybe they've got that sort of consistency and frequency down. Run me through maybe what some of your like phases would look like on the way to a half marathon, maybe from the intensity side. Are you working on some certain systems in different times? And maybe like where your mileage is sort of areas where you're focusing on building mileage or tapering that off and cutting it down. What sort of high level would that look like for a half marathon sort of athlete?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of that would be like the time frame that I'd be working with an athlete for. And I mean, as you know, as a coach, ideally the longer the better,
Mhm.
because if we can build it out over a longer time scale, then it allows us to just have a little bit more control over a lot of these variables versus kind of playing catch up. You know, when I work with athletes who just want to say sign on for coaching for like a 12-week block or for just their quote unquote race season and then kind of do their own thing through the off season, you're often spending a lot of that time chasing your tail. But for the sake of the example, I'll say if someone reaches out and to me and they tell me in 5 months or 4 months I want to run a half marathon. So maybe at the new year they say, okay, I want to target a half marathon at the end of April. What would that look like? I think for me the real like critical aspect of like the foundational aspect of run training for me is um, I think to perform well in any distance you choose, improving your speed and your efficiency has to come first. And so developing that speed and specifically like focusing on 5K and 10K fitness really will be like the bellwether of all other performance over various distances. And so for the most part, I would, let's say I have a 4 month time span. I'd want to spend at least 2 of those months, maybe even three, really pushing their speed. And so that could look something like, again, starting with trying to find that consistent weekly schedule that they can tick off, and then starting to incorporate some fast workouts. So, what do we do when we try to focus on 5K speed? We're probably going to run things like 400 repeats. We're going to run 800s. As we get towards kind of um, the peak 5K fitness, we might even start going as long as like 1K or 1200 intervals at or very slightly above 5K pace. And that's really kind of stoking the flame of your top end speed. And also from a physiological standpoint, you're really hammering in your output at VO2 max when you're doing those types of um, intervals, like the duration of those intervals, like 1 to 3 or 4 minutes. Um, and that's really where you're going to get the best bang for your buck in terms of fitness improvements, because your output at VO2 max is really the key indicator of your potential for performance at literally every distance from like 1 mile to at least 50 mile. And athletes now like David Roach are pushing that out to maybe even 100 mile. Like your key indication of performance over 100 mile is how fast you go at VO2 max. And so I try to spend really a big chunk of the year, like the whole year for most of my athletes, developing that speed because it's making you more efficient over any distance you choose after that. Um, and then going back to this example of say like a 4 month timeline for a half marathon, probably 6 to 8 weeks out, we're going to start making sure that the long run is long enough that it's supporting the endurance requirements for that distance. And so we'll start building out the long run um, for an athlete, it could look something like an hour 45 or 2 hours. And then start, as we continue kind of building on that, start incorporating some race specific work in that long run, because again it's just a really good opportunity to replicate the demands of the race, um, putting in some good quality work in the long run. And so my general philosophy is we kind of start on two ends of this spectrum where we're hammering in that consistency and the durability with easy volume, and then we're on the other side of the spectrum, we're running really fast to try to improve our running economy. And then as we get closer to those key races, like the real high priority ones in the athlete's calendar, we start bringing those two kind of points closer together where we're starting to really target the race specific demands, race pace efforts, things like that. And really, for me at least as a coach, it's not going to be until the final, say, 4 to 6 weeks out from a race where we really start dialing in the specifics of the course and the conditions of the course, because those like real race specific variables um, are they're important, but they're not as important as that big foundational piece that we are starting with of being strong, being durable, being fast and efficient. Um, Once you have all those, we can start layering in the race specificity in those final weeks. And so yeah, in the final kind of key like peak weeks of the half marathon, what I'd love to see an athlete doing would be still hitting some really good quality midweek speed workouts, but we'd be moving slightly away from like the pure VO2 max efforts into things like mile repeats or 2K repeats, where you're kind of drawing on that endurance and that strength as well. And then in the long run, we're probably putting in some good quality like half marathon pace intervals where we're just getting the body and mind used to running at that effort and frankly that discomfort for extended periods of time as well, because that's a really important adaptation too. And so that those are kind of the things that I really try to hit and make sure that we've covered off all these variables before an athlete targets a key race like that.
Where do you kind of stand on one of the my favorite quotes is like training is for improving fitness, not proving fitness. Where do you kind of land in are you trying to get the athlete to hit that A+ pace every time, or mainly find the feel of it and know that race day has a bit of an extra? Where does your kind of philosophy line on that part?
This is a really great question, and you'll have to forgive me on this because it might have been Krista Duchesne who gave this quote, but and sorry if I'm wrong, but I think it was where she said something like, "Your you should dictate your goal time for your upcoming race based on how your training is going, not the other way around." And like almost all of us are guilty of this, where you sign up for a race and you say, okay, I'm doing a half marathon. I want to run this time. And I hope all of the other variables in my life and in my physiology and everything else line up that I can just hit this like completely meaningless time that I attach to this race versus saying something like, I want to run a half marathon in 12 weeks. This is where I'm at right now. This is my most recent 5K result. And therefore I can kind of extrapolate some ideas of what I could potentially maintain for a half marathon. This is how my workouts have been going. These are the number of miles I've been able to hit every week. Therefore, here's my pretty good estimate on what I think I can do for this half marathon if I execute it really well and if my focus is really great on race day and things like that, right? Unfortunately, that type of goal setting isn't quite as exciting for a lot of people. And so the way that I try to get around that is I'll always work with athletes who typically have a goal time in mind when they sign up for a race, but um, and I'll allow that to in a way kind of create like a range or rough target for pacing within a workout. But I always go back to the most important metric for any athlete is rate of perceived exertion. And so even if I'm writing a workout where I say, I want you to run 4 by 2K at 10K pace, I won't actually write it as 10K pace. I'll say um, at 10K effort. And I'll try to include some cues like think about the last 10K you ran and what did kilometer 6 feel like in that 10K? That's what we're trying to target for this workout. That's the feeling I want you to target. Um, and it's sometimes it's a tough sell for athletes to do that because we're all a little bit numbers driven and that's how we measure progress and things like that. Um, but rate of perceived exertion is like the absolute most important metric that any of us can use. you just have to observe it objectively when you're in these workouts doing them yourself and not place judgment on what you're feeling, but really be honest with yourself and understand like could I really maintain this effort for 10K or when I'm like at 98% of my max 1500 meters into my first rep type of thing. Um, and so I really try to instill that in all the athletes that I work with that what you're feeling inside is way more important than what the watch says. And not only is that going to make sure that you're hitting the right efforts and you're accomplishing the workout as you should, but it's also giving you this super powerful tool to be able to tune into what's going on inside that you can dial into in a race and really be able to assess how things are going and not be tied to the watch in a race setting, meaning that if you get in the race and it's not your day and the times are just not coming the way you hope they would, it's not a disaster. You tune into what's going on internally and you execute the best you can on that day. Or vice versa. Sometimes you're tying yourself to a pace and maybe you could have had a huge breakthrough that day, but you're just so stuck on running your pace and being thrilled that it feels pretty comfortable today that you're good with that. Whereas maybe you had, another 30 seconds or a minute or 5 minutes in your body that day. Um, and so that's really the key for me is like really trying to instill in my athletes that what you're feeling internally is way more important than what the watch says. And we can use the watch to kind of set rough kind of um, goalposts for a workout, but there always needs to be that element of subjectivity in there as well.
How do you feel about Garmin's workout mode where it yells at you for going too slow and too fast? Where how do you feel about that?
I actually had a funny kind of conversation with a couple of my athletes recently, but this was about like the workout files for bike workouts.
Oh yeah.
I intentionally didn't build a workout file in Training Peaks for them for a long ride. And I said something like, this is a pretty straightforward workout. It was like 2 by 40 minutes at half Ironman pace or something. And I said, there's no workout file because I don't know if you're going to do this inside or outside. It's an easy one to figure out though, so just have at her. And I got multiple like messages that night saying like, "Where's my workout file? I don't know what to do." Um, but taking it to the run, like I'll be honest, I didn't even know this was a thing until like six
Oh,
months ago that you could upload the file onto your run, like on your watch and do it as a run. And so I guess my answer to that would be like, no, it's not really my thing.
amen.
Um, Again, because we want to dial into perceived exertion. If you could create a workout file on your watch that tells you like you need to be at 12 out of 20 RPE for this interval, and just hold that, great. Like I'm all for it. But if we have to do it by pace, then I mean there are just too many variables that actually want included in a run workout that I'd prefer someone not do that. I often will write workouts where I'll write the workout with some kind of structure to it, but then I'll say, I want you to do this run on a hilly course, or I want you to do this on like some rolling trails, and don't worry about the pace, but dial into the effort that feels appropriate for kilometer 6 of a 10K again, for example. And so those are little ways I try to like pull back from athletes being too data driven. Because again, the numbers can be great. They can be useful for us for tracking improvements and things like that. But I also don't want my athletes to become like robots where they're just taking off workouts and like not really thinking about it or heading out the door and then spending the whole run looking at their watch. Meanwhile, like, I don't know, I'm a little bit more of a hippie with it when it comes to running, but I'm much more like, oh, I saw all these great, like these cool birds and the scenery was beautiful. And oh yeah, I had a great workout too. Um, but again, I think it's a matter of just balancing the two where um, we can use the numbers as rough goalposts, but I don't want an athlete judging the success of their workout based on whether they hit their paces to the exact number or within like plus or minus 5%. Because I want all the subjectivity included in it. I want them to be able to tune into their efforts over various terrains and distances with different shoes on, things like that. And I just want them to have like a positive experience when they're going out and exercising. Like when you zoom out a bit, and think back to like why did we start running? We probably all started getting into running because we like being outside and we like being active and we like looking at the scenery and all that stuff. And so as silly as it can sound, like I want my athletes to be doing the sport for the right reasons, for being healthy, for being outside in nature and all this stuff. And if you're like super tied to your electronics all the time, it kind of takes an element of that away. And so I try to balance both of them by sometimes I'll prescribe workouts that are entirely like terrain based or like I said, I'll prescribe workouts where I say, here are your rough targets, but I'm not judging the success of your workout, whether you hit that target right on or not. I want you to tell me, yeah, that felt like the right effort today, and I felt like I executed it really well. Because that's what's going to lead to better consistency over time, and just being more in tune with yourself as an athlete and as a person for that matter.
Yeah. Oh man, can't echo that enough. I totally agree. More and more, I'm not building the workouts anymore and getting athletes to learn those tools that they need to be able to adjust in a race. And I feel like a lot of the research I've read, especially around, I find a lot of the very data-driven athletes are like, hey, I'm looking to find like that flow state on the run. How do I find that? And I'm like, a lot of my athletes who have that feel side have felt like that sort of flow state, if you want to call it a little bit more, because all the research I've read is like the more you are looking at a watch and checking all this data and you have all these notifications going off on your watch, that actually is more likely to knock you out of the flow state and less of a chance of being able to just lock in on how you're feeling and build that momentum and like go with the flow and catch that pack in front of you or that person that's passing you, latching onto them, versus if you're in this this data driven state, you just lose a lot of that. Have you found some of that on your end? I definitely have noticed that more as I've gone to the RPE side of things.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's funny. Like, I think there would be some athletes who would sit on their Garmin like, "Where's the flow state section on this? Like, how do I execute flow state?" But no, it's like seriously, I know that there are some athletes who like they really do get a lot of like motivation and excitement from from the numbers, from hitting their targets, and from looking at their graph after it and things like that. And if that's part of what draws you into the sport and what like keeps you going, then great. I'm all for it. But as you said, being able to tune in more internally, like remove some of the distractions, at least for me, like that's really the fundamental reason why I do this as an athlete myself. And so all I can do as a coach is like try to preach that a little bit to my athletes that like I want you out here running or doing triathlon, whatever it may be, because you love it, because it like going and doing your run is going to be the best part of your day. And you're probably going to experience that more if you're tuned in more internally to what's going on while still executing a workout or accomplishing part of a plan versus just being so dialed into the plan that like, yep, I went out and did my thing. I hit all my numbers and like, oh yeah, I forgot to look up and like look around and notice what was even going on around me. So, and I totally agree. Like, yeah, when it comes to flow state, which I think it can be an elusive thing, but you can also think of it something like just getting into a rhythm in an interval or in a race where you're not in this conscious moment where you're like, oh, I'm in flow state. This is the greatest thing ever. I feel so flowy. But you're in that kind of state of mind where your kind of conscious awareness is just really tuned into what you're doing in that moment and finding like a really good rhythm with your stride or with your swim stroke, whatever it may be, or if you're out on your bike, like just having that split second moment of like, oh, this is awesome. Like I'm going so fast. This is so much fun. Um, those are the experiences that really stick with you. And I truly believe that those are really key to optimal performance too. It's funny. I've had this like ongoing joke for a while that like um, I'm well aware that most people in endurance sports are probably like a very type A individual, like that type A personality where they're data driven, they're competitive, they're here to like to take blood, you know what I mean? And that can be a really valuable tool for performance. But I really believe like the most successful athletes, and I mean personal success. I don't mean just like world championships and Olympic medals and stuff. I mean like really hitting like the peak of your personal success in sport comes from people who can be a little bit more pragmatic and a little bit more of a problem-solving mentality versus like just being super type A, stuck on the numbers, focused on like I pass or fail this workout, or I hit my numbers or I didn't. I think though that that can be a tool you can use and you can leverage from time to time. But I really think if you want to be in this sport for a long period of time, you need to be able to let that go and dial into the like the more soft skills of being an athlete, of being able to tune into what's going on internally, being able to reframe what you find to be success or enjoyment in the sport. And the people who stick around for longer periods of time, they're the ones who are going to be either the most successful objectively or just getting the most fulfillment out of the sport, which really is my true measure of success.
Yeah. And even on the side of like this type A athlete, I tell all my athletes whether they want to listen or not, like every training week and training block is written in pencil. And like you got to realize it's not just like we threw these workouts in the weekend. You just got to get them all done. And that's what moves you forward, like how you come into them and out of them and where they are in the days and drop sometimes the best interval or best workout you did is the one you didn't do kind of thing. So I feel like a lot of people just got to realize these like micro adjustments that you make and like to lean on your coach for that make like massive difference on like staying injury free and getting better. It's not just if that was the case, we would just dump all the workouts on the Monday and training peaks and be like, all right, throw them on whatever days you want. And if you complete that, you're going to be a better athlete next week.
Yeah, here's the plan. Figure it out, live or die. No, it's so true. Like, I, as a coach, I love seeing when an athlete will put in a comment in their workout and say, I skipped the last interval today because honestly, like, I didn't sleep that well and like 4 reps felt like enough today. I'm like, high five. Like that's awesome. You totally nailed the purpose of this workout, which was to push yourself just a little bit and kind of nudge those training adaptations just a little bit. But you still had the awareness and the objectivity to say, yeah, this is the right amount, and go and doing one more would be detrimental. I might put myself like back a week by doing that, and being able to make that decision and having the confidence to do that is to me the mark of a mature athlete and one who is going to be in the sport for a while. And so, yeah, I love seeing those comments come in. And of course, I'd love to do it in person with all my athletes, but having to do some of it online, of course, there's that extra layer. But when I see those comments come in, that not only am I proud of the athlete, but I also kind of will give myself a little bit of a pat on the back, just selfishly knowing that I hope that the reason why they did that is I provided them with the confidence and some of the tools to make those decisions themselves because I can't be there all the time. And so, yeah, I love seeing that stuff too.
Well said. And in this day of lots of social media and Strava, where do you kind of land on the both the positives and negatives that both of those are bringing to runners these days? Maybe you're just gonna say all negatives, but curious where your head's at there.
Oh man, I shouldn't have known this one was coming. No, I got in a almost entirely positive uh, social media conversation with a lot of athletes around Strava a few months ago. I'll put it this way, like a big part of why we do this sport, whether you are a professional athlete or you're out there just trying to be healthy and spend a bit of time outside, like a big part of that is for the social element. And so if there's something that you're using that is contributing positively to your experience in the sport, like I'm never gonna knock that. Like if you love Strava and that's your thing and you get so excited, like uploading a run and having conversations with people, and it truly is like a positive outlet for you, go for it. Like I'll never question that. Um, the conversation that I was getting into um, over like Strava specifically was um, just trying to take like an analytical thought to it. Like, so why do we choose this medium of where we're like sharing all of this like workout data that as we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes, has all these subjective variables to it. Like, why is that the medium where we choose to like make these community connections? And like, do we really need like all that workout data on there just to like make friends with someone who is also running down the street? And like, we probably could have just stopped to say hi to them. Um, and so yeah, I mean, I think anything where you're building connection, you're building community is a great thing. So so it's never as black and white as like I think Strava is the worst and it's terrible. What I'll say for me is like I have used it. I'm not on Strava right now. I haven't been for a long time, but for me at least, I definitely found like when I was uploading workouts to it, it was just like these little micro decisions that you're making all the time, like within a run, where you're like, I know that I'm going to be sharing this with like whoever, like all four people who follow me or whatever it is, you know what I mean? Or like all 100 people who are part of this club. Um, and and maybe if being on Strava has these like accumulation of little micro decisions where like I know people are watching, so like maybe I will do that last interval because that I was thinking about not doing because I know that everybody else is, and like what are people going to think of me if they see that I did 4 reps like and everyone else in the group did 5? And those little decisions over time, like if that's affecting your consistency um, or your ability to tune in internally to know what's best for you as an athlete, that's where I think it can be a negative thing. Um, and so as long as it's something that like you find you get value out of it, you're building community, you're building connections, you're making friends, like that's great. Like that's awesome. But if my question to it is like, if we didn't share workout data on it, and this was the like the philosophical question I was trying to get into is if the only numbers or the only metrics you could put in Strava were yes, I exercised today, and yes or no, did it contribute to my well-being? Like, am I happier today because I did this exercise with no numbers, like no mileage, no paces attached to it? Would you still share it and would you still use Strava? And if the answer is yes, then great, like let's build a community there. But if you're like, oh, that doesn't sound as interesting, like I really want to know what Mark did for his long run last weekend because like I want to make sure that I go like as far as he did, then maybe that's not the best use for it. Maybe there are things that you could be doing instead to try to build community. And so like the big thing for me is just like why do we do these things and like really thinking critically about it. And so if you're doing that, then great. But if you're not, then don't tell me I'm a loser for not being on Strava.
Well said. Yeah, I find Strava and social media is more for a community and business development side for me than actually like a comparison type of thing. It's funny, I actually more would say I'm on Strava because so many of my athletes and people I've met are on there, but I more use it now when I'm uploading my workouts to more further like what my philosophy around the stuff is of like dropped this workout or like hey, look how easy I was running on my easy run. Like just hammering home some of those coaching philosophies again versus being like, all right, I'm going to pump my tires and rip 10 seconds a K faster and be wrecked for the rest of the week. Oh, it's funny.
Yeah, no, it's true, and like you said, there could definitely be positive aspects to
Yeah.
any of these things. It's just a matter of why we're doing it, and I think it's just the broader question of like why do we engage in all forms of social media, which is like way too big a question that we'll ever get into like on this
Yeah.
podcast. But like part of my job as a coach at least is trying to encourage my athletes to think critically about like what they're doing and why, at least in the context of sport. And so like maybe we can branch that out farther and just try to become like more self-aware human beings through this too. And so that's a little far-fetched, I think, for a podcast, but that's where I come from at least. And I will say, like, just a very quick like final end point to that is, I know I'm definitely like an anomaly in terms of training and things like that. I do almost all of my training on my own, and it's not that I don't like having friends. It's that a big part of like what I do as an athlete is testing my like coaching theories on myself. And so I try to control. those variables probably more than like I need to, or more than might be like healthy at all times. Of like, I like doing workouts on my own because I can accomplish them the way I'd written it, so I can then like dig into the data of like um, zooming out and looking at a full training plan and analyzing it from a coaching standpoint. And so that's kind of why I end up doing a lot of my stuff on my own and could probably benefit from more of a social element a lot of the time. But maybe that's also why like uh, I don't see as like I as an athlete don't have as much like desire to be on Strava and being connected with other athletes within my workout because I'm like, no, workout is my time. Like I'm laser focused on this and I want to do it the way I'd written it so that I can understand like how it felt and understand my own progress year over year, things like that. Um, and and so that's just where I think my like lens is coming from too.
Everybody's going to have their sliding scale on each of those aspects that's going to be the best for them. And that's why you trial it over a bunch of time, like whether it's doing more workouts with people or less. And then the social media side, all of it is a sliding scale on there that you eventually just got to find your sweet spot over time. So it's good. Yeah, you found your spot and clearly it's paying off in terms of some of the run times you're knocking out these days. But maybe you'll find at some point you'll hit a plateau and you're like, oh, I need to go run with the speedy guys in London to give me that next step. So, like, and but
Totally.
you're open minded to that of like, oh, there's not one way. It's like, but there's seasons for everything.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit. We probably have about 10 or so minutes left. Let's dive into a few like coaching philosophy pieces, and then we'll leave the rest of it for maybe a follow-up episode on this. You talked a little bit about it before, but I know you're a big fan of having things like strides and hill reps in your plan, like almost all the way through for a lot of people, or maybe I'm off base on that. But where tell me a little bit about why you love them and maybe how you implement them in the training for your athletes and if that changes in different phases and how you progress them and what does that look like?
Yeah, and I mean, I can't take any credit for this being like my idea in any way.
Mhm.
This is again, I think as all coaches, I think we try to contribute and just like share collective knowledge. But this was a big one that David Roach really got me onto like 6 or 7 years ago now was like incorporating strides into endurance running, and it's something that in my brief background in club track. I can definitely attest to the fact that like if you're a sprinter, for example, you're spending like 97% of your quote unquote workout time doing dynamic stretching and drills and strides, and then you might do like a couple sprints in your workout, and then you shut it down and cool down. Um, and I mention that because I think incorporating strides, so when we talk about strides, we're thinking like 10 to 30-second accelerations to almost max effort. So not a full sprint, but like call it like your 1 mile pace type of thing. Um, all like high performance running programs have incorporated this stuff for like the last probably 30 or 40 years. And running is one of these interesting sports where oftentimes the leading edge of athletes and coaching are actually ahead of the research. And then the research often is catching up to then like verify physiologically what's going on and why people are succeeding versus the other way around. In most cases, research is leading innovation. Um, but it's very well established now in research that incorporating these short bursts of speed into a long distance running plan will have direct implications on improving your running economy, which is essentially your efficiency at running a given pace. It improves your strength and things like tendon elasticity, all these different variables. It contributes to um, potentially changing muscle fiber typology, all these crazy internal things going on. But the long story short is like doing little bits of really fast running um, teaches the body how to run fast more efficiently. And so when you boil it down to that, it's like why aren't we all doing this all of the time? It's something that, by definition, shouldn't be physically taxing at all. It's like these sub-maximal efforts that really don't even like, you're shutting it down before there's even like an anaerobic strain to it. Um, but it directly contributes to making you more efficient at every distance that you run. And when I first started reading about this stuff, I truly thought there's no way it's this easy. There's no way it's this simple. That throwing in 4, 6, 20-second accelerations in my run once or twice a week will have any meaningful impact on run like my run performance. And when I started coaching myself, like writing my own training and everything, it was at the end of a race season and like right in the dead of my off season, like took a month off running, got back running for 4 or 6 weeks and ran like my second fastest ever 5K in like late November one year. Um, just from running really easy. Like, so for me, running 6 minute Ks is like 2.5 minutes per kilometer slower than like my 10K pace at that time. So like ridiculously easy, and then a little bit of these really fast efforts. And to me, that was all the proof I needed that there is definitely something to this, and let's continue exploring it. And so yeah, I like to incorporate strides and hill reps and things like that throughout the year for all my athletes, regardless of the distance that they do, and they'll play like a more important role in, let's say, off-season running. So for most athletes, at least in the northern hemisphere, we'll say like November to February is really where we're like building the base of the year, and we'll be hitting good sets of strides at least twice a week throughout that time. And then as we get closer to race season, it becomes more of a maintenance thing, but like at least once a week, I'll have all my athletes run a few strides because it's just, um, again, keeping kind of going into maintenance phase with the speed and the efficiency and not letting that drop while we start dialing in things like half marathon pace or marathon pace, where no matter how fast a runner you are, you're well under your maximum pace at like your top speed at those distances. And so we want to make sure we're always stoking that flame a little bit throughout the year. And it'll have a larger component in the off season where that becomes our main priority, is like kind of building our capacity and efficiency. And then um, as we get into race season, that goes a little bit on the back burner, but we never want to lose it entirely, because it's something that's so easy to incorporate into run training. And like I said, if you're doing it properly, really shouldn't have like any effect on fatigue, but it absolutely has an impact internally on your physiology. And so, yeah, like why aren't we doing this all the time?
Love it. So final question for episode one here, and we'll do another episode to cover off the other questions we have here. But around that like form side of things, where do you sort of land? I get a lot of questions from especially newer athletes that start with me. Hey, I took this like video of myself on the treadmill, or my significant other took a video of me running. Can you give me like some form tips? Are you somebody that would make actual form changes, or just use things like these strides, hill reps, improvement of fitness over time, strength training? Where do you sort of land on the modification of form side of things?
It's definitely a question that I get frequently as well, and I've been fortunate to be able to dig into a fair bit of biomechanics research on this as well. And my short answer would be, aside from a few very rare exceptions where someone might be doing something like a little bit ridiculous with their form, um, don't touch your run form, like ever. The two things that we can really work on that will indirectly improve run form is cadence. Cadence is the one thing with your kind of running biomechanics that, specifically increasing cadence, I should say, is the one thing that has pretty good merit in reducing injury risk. It's pretty universal that increasing your run cadence will reduce injury risk and won't negatively impact things like running economy. But getting into things like changing your foot strike or changing your arm carriage, things like that, for 99.9% of runners out there, your body will figure out the most efficient way to move itself without you consciously thinking about it at all. I've even seen studies where just thinking about things like run form or thinking about your breathing makes you less efficient at doing those things. And so the body knows what's going to work. So the one thing we can do definitely is increase run cadence. If someone's cadence is say below like 170 type of thing, there's certainly room on the table to bump that up and be confident that you are very unlikely to increase run or increase injury risk, but you're pretty likely to improve your efficiency and your form might naturally clean up as a result of that as well. And then also incorporating things like these strides and hill reps, so these short 20, 30-second bursts of speed. These things naturally ingrain more efficient neuromuscular firing patterns as well. And so that's just a fancy word of saying, fancy way of saying you will get more efficient. Your running form will get more fluid and um, more like faster and it'll become easier just by incorporating these things where you're not actually thinking about your form consciously. So we're kind of doing these peripheral things because if you try to change something like I said, your foot strike, there's a very good chance you're just going to end up getting yourself injured because your body knows how to do it most efficiently already. And so those are the things that I try to ingrain in athletes when we talk about run form is don't actually think about your run form, but these are a couple of the things you can try that will potentially make your form a little bit more efficient. And the big takeaway with it is it really doesn't matter what your run form looks like either. It's a matter of how much energy your body's expending to go at a certain pace. And that looks different for literally everybody. You can watch it at the Boston Marathon. We were looking at the front pack of men, and out of 10 guys, like they all look a little bit different, and probably 9 of them are heel striking, and half of them are crossing their arms across their hands across
Mhm.
their chest, and they're running 440 miles.
Yeah.
Um, so there's no right answer to it, but there are a few things we can do to ensure that you're maximizing your efficiency as a runner without worrying about what things look like necessarily.
Love that. Yeah, I was just going to use the example. I was just thinking of even like Helen O'Beary, who just came second there. Like she has a wild sort of run stride with arms that are like up near her face and like she's bounding up and down, and you would not think it's efficient, yet she's been just won the last 2 years and then came second today. So perfect example. Elite marathoners, like if they can do it, you who's just starting your run journey does not need to make these massive modifications. Like just start going back to your pieces, being consistent, getting the frequency up, don't get yourself injured, learn the tools that you need, and then man, the things you see it with most runners when you get that down for like 6 to 10 weeks, like they just shoot up like a rocket ship at that point.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you definitely have a lot of experience seeing that too. Having the luxury and the ability to see a lot more athletes both in person and overall than I do. But it is fun to watch and it's fun being able to like try to share these tidbits of knowledge if you can. Because I think for a lot of people it's more simple um, than they may think or believe. But just getting those foundational aspects together and repeating that and making it kind of a routine um, is where the improvements really come from.
I love it. I love it. All right, let's wrap up part one here, but stay tuned, everyone. We're going to record probably another hour episode to knock off the other half of our questions, but there's just too much good stuff to cover. So we'll wrap it there and we'll catch you on episode 2. Stay tuned.